Welcome to chapter 14 of the book of Job. Life is short and full of wrath is the title. Read a little in the Greek and we'll go into this chapter. Vrotos gar genitos gynekos oligovios ke pleuris orgis. E osper anthros anthisen exepisen apedra they. Osperskia ke umi sti. I was going through this, and I came up to the question of exactly how would you classify Job's attitude here? Is he a nihilist or a pessimist, or what is he? And so I looked it up in the dictionary, and it had three possible things that are very, very similar, but yet are different. And I'll read it to you and see what you think, and we'll go through and see which one fits here the best. It says, a cynic is basically a person who doubts most of the situations and people. Cynics don't trust any person easily, nor they accept any situation easily. A pessimist is someone who has a negative mindset towards life in almost everything. Every situation is bad or gloomy for that person. Happiness, hope, joy does not exist for a pessimist. A nihilist is one who is neutral in every situation or event. For him, good and bad are one and the same things. Everything is pointless and meaningless for him. Thus, all concepts and theories loses their value. Now, it begins with Job. This is the third chapter. He's speaking by himself. For a mortal born of a woman is short-lived. Well, we only live the most like 115 years. I guess that's short, but in those days it was closer to 200. And it's full of wrath. I suppose you could look at it that way. The wrath comes from people, and does it come from God? I suppose if you're doing evil. Or as the flower, anthos, blooming, he falls off, and he runs away as a shadow and in no way stands. Well, that's very true. We do are like a flower, and the petals fall off, the flower falls off. You get old like I am, other people in their 80s, 90s, things start falling apart. And he runs away as a shadow and in no way stands, and death takes over. And sort of, to me, it's not really either nihilistic or pessimistic. It's just showing a matter of fact. And then he questions, have you, and that's the you is God, have you not also made an account of this and made this to enter before you in judgment, that man is not going to live he's going to die? And so remember, this is back at the time of before Abraham, probably, that at the beginning of recorded history as far as in writings. Greek mythology was taking over in the world of the Mediterranean, which was made up of stories that were told and written down by Homeros, known as Homer, the Iliad and the Odyssey, and all about gods and man and so forth. So this was in the same time, but yet nowhere in the book of Job is there anything really that shows it to be mythological. There are a few words that are similar, and we'll get to those here in a little bit. But he doesn't see Jesus, of course. Does he even know about what's going to happen after he dies, or is that the end? Wouldn't know, really. No one's told him. And then he says, for who will be clean from filth? And he's looking at probably himself and dirty, working, and so forth, but no one. If even his existence be one day upon the earth, yet his months are counted by you. So God knows the time of man. Chronon, right here. For a time you appointed, in no way shall he pass beyond. And as I mentioned before, my formula for life, chronon, time, is gamma, Genesis, to thanatos, death, equals chronos, here, time. From beginning, our birth to our death, that's time. For you appointed time. So we are given time by being born by a woman. God has allowed this to happen through the passing of the sperm into the fertilizing of the egg, and it becomes a human. And he sets a time, no way shall we pass beyond. Can go before, I think, by committing suicide. Separate him, that he should be still, and he shall think well of existence as a hireling. So some people at that time probably, that you're just basically on borrowed time. You've been given time on this earth, and you may think that way now, and God is the one who has hired us to spend this time on earth and to do his will. This is the grand scheme that God has set. But now people don't have to do his will. For there is hope to a tree. For if it should be cut down, still it will bloom again. The tree really doesn't have hope. It's a figure of speech because of it blooming again. He's calling that hope. And its tender branch in no way shall fail. And I just cut down some escallonia hedges all the way down to the root, just the stump. And I did 6 of them. I cut them down to the stump. 3 of them I dug out, pulled them out, covered them over with dirt. 3 I left in because 2 of them are going to be covered over by a bunch of ivy, so why work at pulling them out? But the 3rd I need to dig up. But I go back, and there was the first one I cut down to the stump, and now it's growing pieces coming out. They're already green. So this is what happens. Even if it cuts down, it's still going to grow. For if, it says in verse 8, its root should grow old in the earth, and its trunk should come to an end in the rock, from a scent of water it shall bloom. So apparently my stump is getting water, and shall produce a harvest as if newly planted. In a couple of years it would be another hedge. But a man coming to an end is undone. Now that's what he sees. And is that pessimism or is that nihilism? Not quite sure. I guess it doesn't really matter, but this is what he's saying. He feels that when you come to an end, then you're undone. Well, you don't know. So I suppose that would be undone. And a mortal falling is no longer, because mortality is alive, and when you're dead, you're not a mortal. But if you're alive after the death, then you're immortal. For chrono, for in time, a sea is depleted, and a river being made desolate is dried up. So nature and the earth changes all the time, and over a certain period of time, many animals have existed and are now no longer around, and mountains have changed, and all sorts of things. So this is all true. But man, going to sleep, shall certainly not rise up. Well, there he's wrong. But he doesn't know that, because that's all he sees, and doesn't think man can rise up. Jesus, he was up in Galilee, and he got a note that his friend Lazarus was sick, and he didn't go. And he said that Lazarus was sleeping. He told the disciples. And then they said, well, if he's sleeping, we shouldn't go back. And he said, well, he's dead. So Jesus went back and rose Lazarus up from being in the tomb. He came out all bundled up when Jesus says, Lazarus, come forth. So Jesus has the power of death and resurrection. But without him, I don't see where you would see it in the Old Testament. Now, I think people believed that people did live somewhere afterwards, because later with King Saul, he goes with a man to the witch at Endor to find out if how successful he's going to be in the battle with the Philistines. And he has the witch bring Samuel back from the dead, and Samuel comes out, and what are you bothering me for? And so Saul talks to him, and Samuel gives him the bad news that he's not going to make it in his family. So there was a man coming back from the dead there, but that was quite a bit after Job here. And he continues, until whenever the heaven in no way shall be sewn together, and they shall not wake up from their sleep. That's interesting. He does call it sleep instead of death. For aught in Hades, so apparently they considered there was a place called Hades, and that is in Greek mythology. And it's a place of the shades. The shades were unembodied spirits that were in a dark area that went around, and they became in existence after they were crossed over the river Styx in Greek mythology and paid the boatman, I forgot his name, they gave him a money, and it was generally put into the mouth of the dead person, gave him the money, and he took him across the river Styx to Adi, and this is where they were. And there's one video on this man. All I know is he was a professor of art, went to France, he died, and he went to Hades, and what he described was pretty much what I just said. But anyway, Job says, for aught in Hades, you guarded me. So he does feel like he's going somewhere. It's interesting. And you hid me until whenever your anger should cease. So it looks like the idea of Hades is sort of a neutral area. Depends on what God decides to do with you there. And should have ordered to me a time in which you shall make a mention of me. And that does happen with the resurrection. For if a man should die, shall he live again, having completed the days of his existence? And he's questioning this, and I think a lot of people question this. Even today, people that don't believe in a resurrection or an afterlife, am I going to live? What's going to happen? And spend time thinking about it, especially when they get nearer to death. I shall wait until I should exist again. So he does look at the possibility. Then you shall call, and I will hearken to you. Just like Jesus called Lazarus. Lazarus, come forth. Lazarus hearkened. But the works, but the works of your hands do not undo. But you counted my practices, and in no way shall there go by you even one of my sins. Now he considers himself having sinned, but yet God looks at him as sinless. It's almost like Jesus was there to bring him as sinless before God in some way, and maybe Jesus did. Maybe when it mentions that he went to the spirits in prison, it could have been that he went there, and in the past there was no time, so when Jesus went there, it was beyond time, So it could have been in our time before this happened. So I don't know if you understand it, but Jesus could have been there because the time is before, there's no time. So when he's there, and he could go there and cause Job to not have to go to Hades and to be with him. And you set seal upon my lawless deeds in a bag. And Jesus set seal upon our lawless deeds and puts them in a place that we will not be accountable to them because of the forgiveness of sins that comes through his death and resurrection and his power that he can do that. And it's marked, if in anything I violated unwillingly. It's marked. Now with the Jews later on, they had sacrifices for violating unwillingly. In 18, and moreover, a mountain falling shall fall into ruin. Rocks cave in, avalanches, and a rock shall be worn old from out of its place. Waters ground stones smooth, and waters flooded the steeps of the embankment of the earth, and you destroy the endurance of man. Life wears us away, and we become, with the water over us, smooth maybe, but in a way that's, we are just worn down smooth. You thrust him through into the end, and he is undone. You set your face against him and send him out. God does allow us to die, and he sends us out of earth. And this is basically that's true. And though there are many of his sons being born, if he had children and grandchildren, he knows it not, because you only know maybe 2 generations, 3 at the most. If also they should become few, he has not knowledge. But his flesh aches, and his soul mourns. And the person aching flesh can happen through bad health and growing old, and the soul mourns not being able to do things that you can do. So now, is he a cynic? Well, I don't really think he's doubting most. He's just doubting certain bad situations, but there's a lot of good things that he's brought out also in other places. So I wouldn't call him a cynic. The nihilist is one who's neutral to every situation, but he sees God in these situations. So I don't consider him a nihilist. And the pessimist looks on the bad things. Everything that's going to happen is bad, and I don't see that either. I look at Job as a realist. He sees reality, and what he can see is only limited, and because of his time. We, living in this life, are limited to what we can see. We don't see, only except for what we see in the Bible, as we've been told, but we're not going to, if we were in this other place and we're there, we could see and understand it, but we would have to realize at that time, well, we didn't see it now. And so it's very interesting in the book of Job, because it goes back so far and affects us even today at the end of time, possibly of the end of an era, an eon. Now we go to another one, back to Eliphaz, the first king who spoke, and he says Job is held liable for his words, accountable, liable to his words, and we'll find out what Eliphaz, the Temanite, has to say to Job in our next video seminar. Hope you join us. Till then, God bless.